Before you go any further, look below and click the subscribe button.
Hello, my name is Melissa Ambers with Savvy, the Business Podcast. I'm excited to have you listening to us today. I have Kris Boesch with me today, and we're going to talk a little about, culture in the workplace, that elephant in the room that a lot of people don't like to touch, especially with the environment that we're in now. Since the pandemic, this is nothing new. So let me just put that out there. This is absolutely nothing new. But since the pandemic, the spotlight has been put on so many things that's been going on for decades in the workplace that so many organizations are not changing, not wanting to touch the topic or discuss some of the things that's going on. And of course, there's many things, but we're going to hit on this one thing today. So let me read a little bit of Kris's bio and then we'll jump right in. Kris Boesch is the CEO and founder of Choose People, a company that transforms company cultures, increases employee happiness, and boosts the bottom line. The Choose People 360 Culture Audit is based on over 1,000 hours of research conducted with the industrial organization psychology department at Colorado State University. She is also the author of Culture Works, How to Create Happiness in the Workplace. Prior to Choose People, Boesch was the CEO of Exodus Moving and Storage. Under her leadership, Exodus became the largest mover in northern Colorado with a turnover rate nearly 40% less than the industry average at a bottom line twice the same average. Kris has been featured as a workplace culture expert in Inc. Entrepreneur and Forbes, and was recently named one of the top 100 leadership speakers in Inc. Thank you, Kris, for coming on and joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Melissa. Excited to be with you and your community.
Thank you so much. I am excited to talk about this topic of the culture in the workplace. What enticed you about this topic to one, create a company to say choose people, and your company name just says it all. What happened for you to, transition from a moving company to choosing people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So prior to Choose People, right, I had the moving company, and when I first came into that company, let's just say, I asked people on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy or unhappy is your team? And we were 3 on a good day. Like, it was incredibly toxic. It was brutal. People were yelling obscenities at each other. And on top of that, we were struggling to cover payroll. And I didn't know really much of anything about the moving industry, but I knew that, like, this is not how you run a company. And this is back in 2003, right? So long before culture was even in the business vernacular. And, the Department of Transportation wanted to shut us down. Our insurance company was like, we don't want to insure you anymore. I mean, it was kind of one of those dumpster fires. and where you're looking for a prayer. And so it was one of the, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And luckily, between talking to mentors, reading some things, some kind of soul searching, if you will, I kind of the heavens shine down and just got this clarity, okay, if my people feel good about coming to work, they'll take good care of my customers, who in turn will take care of the financial health of the company. And so I was like, what if I was to focus on the employee experience? Because back then, everyone just talked about the customer experience and customer service, and there wasn't this focus on what is the employee experience. And specifically, I was asking, what makes people feel good about coming to work? So this emotional health piece, what would have my crew feel good about coming to work so that when they show up at the front doors of our customers, they're in a space where they're excited to be there, they're excited to serve, they enjoy working with one another, all these different pieces that went into this. And then again, got to this point where we had this extraordinary turnaround success, And I was like, oh my goodness, like, why aren't more organizations focusing on this? Because it's not about throwing money at people. It's not about bigger, better benefits. It really is creating this context within which people are empowered. And for us here at Choose People, when we're talking about like, what is culture, we're literally talking about the context within which your people work. And another way we speak to that is like, what is the air your team breathes while running your marathon, right? So, and that's really when we had such extraordinary success inside the moving company, and then we were able to do the research, then, you know, it was one of those, I was like, I'm ready to start Choose People, because we did the research in 2009 and we opened our doors in 2010. So we've now been doing this for over a decade.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, it's great to hear that someone has been in this, and not, like you say, you've been doing it over a decade. So, you know, there, all of the bumps, bruises, hills, valleys, all of those things, you've kind of went into all of those places and know, okay, I see this coming. These are some things we need to put in place to try to prevent, you know, this slump, or, you know, these different things that's happening. With so many organizations that's, I don't want to say afraid, but kind of real hesitant to touch this topic. Why do you think that is, and what can they do to break that barrier?
Yeah, that's really great question. I think the hesitancy is a lot of organizations have had good intentions, right? Where they want to have a good culture, they want to do the right thing. And so they try, and try looks like putting together the bowling party that no one shows up for. You know, try looks like, you know, incentive programs that end up backfiring. Try looks like forced fun, which is kind of a little bit back to the bowling party, but where leadership has these good intentions, and yet their efforts are not only not fruitful, but sometimes even damaging. And so there's this sense of like, we can't win. So, and it's in that touchy-feely, you know, arena that isn't, and it actually is, but where it feels like it's not measurable, or that you can't quite get your arms around it. It feels a little bit ethereal. And so there's this sense of like, I don't even know how to create a strategic plan around this. Like, I don't even know how to make these clear action steps around this. And so I think it feels very intimidating. And you are dealing with people's emotions, which can be intimidating. And one of the things that I speak to is this idea, you know, because I do have the opportunity, I do a lot of keynote speaking, and, you know, I'll be speaking to leaders and managers, and invariably, you know, someone will say, well, Kris, I can't be responsible for making my people happy. And I tell them, like, you're absolutely right, because you can't make anyone happy. However, again, you can create a context within which they can be happy, right? And that's, and then really digging in with like, what does that look like? How do you like tangibly, what can we do? What do we say? How do we create this experience for our team members where they can enjoy coming to work, like sincerely look forward to being at work?
I love how you put that. And I mean, you're right. It's like you can't make someone enjoy anything. And like, you know, on my consulting side of my business, when, you know, on the strategic side of it, is, you know, I tell people, you know, sometimes we have to start at the top. It's not always starting at the employees. Oh, well, let's train the employees. Let's train the employees. Start at the top. Train your leaders, your management, your supervisors. Start training them to help them understand how to interact and engage with your employees to create some type of security or comfort, you know, if you will, because so many employees are fearful of losing their jobs or some type of retaliation happening, because it happens all the time. So if I come to you with something and you don't like it, or it's not what you want to hear, you have to worry about being terminated or retaliated against. So how do you start with the leaders to help them understand that you have to understand how to engage with these employees first, And once they start feeling a little comfortable with you, then it's shifting that and letting them know it's okay. Let's train them on how to communicate with you. So how would you open that door on both sides?
Yes. So first, Melissa, you're 100% correct as far as leadership has to lead. They have to lead. And one of the things I always start off with when I'm engaging a new potential client is I'm like, you have to know that your team is a reflection of you. And so if there's things you're proud of your team, that's a reflection of you. If there's things you're disappointed about, that's a reflection of you. And so, and you know this, right? Like you have their back and supporting them and shifting that. And so there's this piece where I actually won't work with a client unless I've spoken to the CEO. And part of my conversation with the CEO is like, listen, we're going to look under the hood, right? And there might be a mirror there. And if there is, just know, like, I have your back. And it doesn't, it isn't always the CEO, right? Sometimes you're like, oh, it's always, it isn't always the CEO. Sometimes there's a lot of different things that go into culture, but I need to know that there's a willingness and that there is a humility and there's an acknowledgement of their influence and their impact inside of this process. And that if I don't have their buy-in, if I don't have, and first I need top brass, right? I need CEO, then the exec team, and then you work with the leadership team and the management team, but they set the precedence for what the culture is. They decide what's allowed and what's not allowed, what's permitted, what's not permitted. How we're going to speak to one another, how we're going to deal with those types of, like you just spoke to, when someone says something to us that's hard for us to hear, like how is that going to be responded to? And that has to come from the top. And now the other thing I do say, and this is because you asked what's the other side of that conversation, is then, after I've been working with a leadership team, then I'll start working with the frontline team, and I'll be like, yes, like your leadership is responsible for leading, but culture takes like all hands on deck. Like every single person, every interaction that you have with one another either builds the culture or tears it down, right? So like this requires your participation, like your active participation in creating this. And again, you all get to acknowledge each other when you're in alignment. You also get to acknowledge them, this is not who we said we were going to be. Let's do a do-over, or let's look at like, that's an old way of being that we said we weren't going to do anymore. Right. Yeah. And where there is grace, quote unquote, to a point. But where there is that dedication and commitment from both sides, but you absolutely have to start with leadership.
Yes, you do. And with everything that you just said of, starting at the top and kind of just, slowly drilling down. And I love the analogy you put, we're going under the hood, but it might be a mirror under the hood. So just be aware. So I love that analogy, but I mean, that is so true because you never know until you start doing that deep dive into things and you get to that problem, that issue, and you could be that issue. And having someone like you to like I said, I have your back, I'm here to support you, and not I'm gonna show you a mirror and point all of these things and just point at you, and not create a solution to how to fix this, and not only to fix it, but to change the entire culture of it. How often do you see that we put a Band-Aid on it all the time? Right. And even when it gets wounded again, we'll put some Neosporin back on it, put a Band-Aid back over it, and we keep doing that instead of let's just fix the issue so we won't keep having this happen.
Yeah, again, where people will try to stop the bleeding, but they're not asking, why are we bleeding? Yeah. Why are we bleeding? And I do just want to circle back a little bit, and I'll come back to this piece too. Yeah. One thing that I always say is like, we all have blind spots. I don't care where you are in the organization. We all have blind spots. And by the way, your CEO, they sweat and bleed, just like you do. They've got insecurities, just like you do.
Yeah.
Like they are trying to do the best they can do with the information they have, the experiences they have, the knowledge they have. And so there is this, and like, I think it speaks a lot to a leader who's like, I'm willing, if I've got a blind spot, I'm willing to get that unearthed and looked at. And then to your point about the Band-Aids, those Band-Aids usually look like, again, incentive programs. It's like, oh, we've got apathy, so let's try to use an incentive program. It's like, well, wait, why is there apathy? Or there'll be a bunch of gossip and drama that's happening. And so then people will try to put like weird rules in place rather than like generating agreement of like, hey, if you have a concern, you're going to talk to someone, not about someone. And we're going to give you the tools on how to do that, because we know it's uncomfortable. We know it's not easy, but like, if we're truly all a stand for one another's success, like we can't lose if we all know that we have one another's backs. And again, you have to foment that. You can't just say that, because
right.
Again, had I gone to my meeting group and been like, we're just all gonna get along now, they'd be like, oh yeah no. So there is a repairing sometimes, depending. So my clients, they're either aspirational, right? So they want to be better tomorrow than they are today. And they want to go from having a culture that's like, nah, it's good, it's okay, it's fine, to really being like off the hook amazing, where their employment brand is out there such that people really do want to come work for them. But then I also have the clients where it is toxic, where it is, they're like, oh my gosh, we are losing people left and right, and we can't retain people, or we're just like in the thick of it. And now I'm having a squirrel moment, but I was following a thread there, but there is just a piece of, those are going to be different conversations and how you're going to move forward depending on where you're starting. But the repairing, if you've got that toxic environment, you can't start with one of our major tenets, which is around emotional intimacy and creating the experience of known, matter, and included. If you don't deal with the toxicity first, which surprisingly does not take, people think it takes like forever to turn a culture around, and it really doesn't, right? But you have to address that toxicity first and address it before you can start putting programs in, right? Because that you'll find that, like you said, people get employee training, like, oh, well, we'll just throw communication training at our team and hope that resolves it. And it's like, well, wait, did you all deal with that huge thing that happened 6 months ago that everyone's still talking about and upset about, and that, that everyone keeps going, it's like that has to get spoken to. Doesn't have to necessarily get resolved, because you may not be able to, but it has to be spoken to, and you have to speak to the impact that it's had on the team, and you have to speak to your commitment moving forward, such that wouldn't happen again in a way that's believable, right? And genuine and authentic. And when you have clarity on like what could have made the difference so that wouldn't happen, because every organization is going to have a pitfall moment, right? It's human, like we all make mistakes. We all have challenges. Like we're not looking for perfection, but we know this ownership piece is just so key to owning like the current state of the culture exactly as it is, where it is, with no sugarcoating, right? But naming it, and naming the impact that's had. And we have a whole thing we recommend around like a clean slate meeting, that if you're in a toxic place, like that's where you start, is with that very first conversation with your entire team. You can't, until you have that conversation, you cannot move, you can't move it. You can't, people are stuck, their heels are dug in, they're pissed off, So.
You are right. You are so right. Almost, I think it's worse than saying, let's sweep it under the rug. I think it's a lot worse than that. And I love what you said earlier, generate an agreement. And I think that was, that should be a light bulb for a lot of people of, you know, people have to get out of the mindset of, I'm your boss, you the employee, do what I say, you just do this, this is your job. It's like people have to get out of that space and, truly have an open door policy. But, talking about, generating an agreement, I think that's so simple and it doesn't cost anything, but just a little time. And, implementing something like that into an organization for them to do that, to have those discussions, figure out what that thing is, and see what they need to do to resolve it and generate that agreement. How important is that for a lot of organizations to do that, to figure out what that is, generate that agreement, and once they do that agreement, follow it and not just make it a one-time thing. How often do you see that happen to where it's almost like a relationship. We are good in the courting stages, and then after we dated for a few months, it kind of goes, yeah. How many times have you seen that agreement that's really great, and then it just kind of slowly we fall back into that old pattern?
Well, again, right, there's those good intentions, which that's some good momentum. We appreciate those good intentions. And if there isn't the follow through, if there isn't the infrastructure to support that agreement right, that sustainability, that kind of cadence of accountability to that agreement, then it's again, it's almost worse because you give people hope. And they're like, oh yeah, remember that one time we said we were gonna do that one thing and like we don't really do it. And so I'd much rather see there be 2 agreements that are followed through on than 10 that are sparkly, that there isn't the capacity for people to hold all that. And I love what you pointed to, right? There is the old school dynamic of like, I'm the boss, do what I tell you to do. And the nice thing is I do think there's a new consciousness that is arising where people are like, oh yeah, like that's not really working anymore.
Yeah.
And I even think about, like, it occurs to me in this conversation, this idea of the open door policy. And I always say, people are like, oh, my door is always open, but I'm the last person to know. So again, there's like, why is that? Why is that? And there is something that's in place that you could even be a really pretty decent manager and people still don't come to you because there is this social norm and social fear of, repercussions, or, don't be the squeaky wheel, or, and also I also say there's like this social expectation that we're given. I give examples of Dilbert and Steve Carell from The Office, and right, there's all these different kind of media things that say bosses are mean, they're greedy, and they're clueless. And so there is this, like, you can have an open door policy, but that doesn't mean people are going to feel comfortable coming
walking
to you
through that door.
Yeah. So then what does it look like for you as the person who's in leadership to go to them? Right.
Yeah.
So rather than making them come to you, where you're proactively seeking their input, their feedback, their suggestions, their ideas, their recommendations, what they see would make a difference, like, and where you're proactively seeking their voice. It's interesting because I think we do have this old school sense of like, oh, they need to come to me. And it's like, well, no, like, because when you think about it, when you're in leadership, like, you're there to support, to guide, to uphold, to, really help someone self-actualize through their work. Right. So it's you getting up under them, which looks like you going to them, as distinct from them like coming to you. It's just it's a mindset shift, I guess or a paradigm shift. Yeah.
Well, I think it's all, mindset because of that old school mentality. And I'm not gonna even say, it's the more seasoned managers and things like that. I mean, it trickles down to, the younger generation that, when you get in this place, you tell these people what to do. That's the mentality of being a manager. I sit back and I point and you go do it. I delegate. I tell you what to do. And I think that mentality has been just trickled down and sprinkled over various generations, that a lot don't quite understand that that is not the case. And then in 2022, this is a whole nother, type of work environment. How do you, break that generational um, thing that's happening over, I tell you what to do? How do you break that with someone that's either new to it, or they've been here for a while and that's just, I've been here since the 70s and 80s, that's just how it is? How do you break that cycle?
Yeah, I break that cycle in a couple ways. One, actually, so something that I will always do is I will acknowledge people. So you start off with acknowledgement for who they are, for the years of dedication, because I'm talking about someone who's more old school, who's been in the position for a while, and just acknowledge like their style of management, they got to it somehow, right? They read the book, they were managed by someone else, like it's what they know. And so acknowledging them for their effort, and then really digging into their commitment. What is their commitment?
Mm-hmm.
And any decent leader or manager is going to say something about developing their people. And they might even say something about like really serving the customers, right? And then you can ask, well, like who's serving the customers, right? So there's, you can speak to that piece as well. But what I find is it's so important to acknowledge people for who they are
Mm-hmm.
in their efforts, then to really find out what their commitment is, and then demonstrate how this new way of doing things, this new paradigm supports that commitment. And that how the old way of being no longer serves their commitment. Maybe it did for a while, but I mean, the new generation doesn't put up with it. They have no patience for it. They have no loyalty to it. They will not stick around. They'd rather eat beans and rice until they find a job where they feel valued, respected, those sorts of things. And so there's just a piece of like, if you can have someone understand also the financial return on investment of having happy employees, and that's something that we have inside of Choose People. We have a document that's like, here's the page, all the math that goes into that financial return on investment. And here's the second page with all the research that backs up those numbers. So let's say you are just money driven. Let's just say that is your commitment, right? Like, let's say it's not heart-based, it's not people-based. You're like, I just really want to make some great money. Even that commitment, you can be like, well, let me tell you why this way of doing things even supports that commitment. And I have to say, for the most part, like anyone, you could be like, what kind of place of work do you want for your kids? What kind of place of work do you want for your beloved? And they're going to describe to you things that you're like, well, that's what we want to create here. Right? Because you just get up under like people that they care about and what they want for them, and then say, well, let's, like, in order to create that for the people who work here, we got to shift the way we go about doing things. And again, giving people really specific, tangible, like, this is how you did it, and this is how you can do it, and let's practice, right? Like that is going to be a practice that you're going to take on until it becomes a habit, until it's something you're comfortable with. Again, like, what does it look like to practice going out and reaching out for people's input, suggestions, ideas? And again, when you feel like you don't have enough time because you got all this work on your own plate, like how are you going to actually manage creating that opportunity to connect with your team members in a meaningful way? And so those are all the kind, like, you have to give people like, here's how you do it, because they don't know, right? If they knew, they'd already be doing it. Yeah, but I'd say that the acknowledgement first, then finding out what their commitment is, and then showing how the commitment connects with the new paradigm, and then like how to actually begin to implement the new paradigm.
So let's jump on the other side of it. Like you say, this new generation and employees now, they're just not having it. And like I said, they'll eat some beans and rice until, they can, find something better and not continue with the mistreatment. And that's one of the things that I am surprised that so many people are surprised at, the big resignation.
Mhm.
Because um, in this day and age, the rate of minimum wage right now, who can live on that?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if I
yeah.
got to live on minimum wage, why burn gas and do all these other things to show up?
Mhm.
And I could do this just sitting at the house until I could find something else better.
Mhm.
And it took a pandemic for a lot of people to start realizing we can't find nobody want to come to work. Who would have thought we have all of these jobs and people saying, no, I don't want it. I'm not coming. And until they started to, whatever light bulb went off to say, okay, we got to raise the wages to pay these people so they can live. Um, and you're spending all this time going to work, working $40, $50 a week, and you're still struggling. That just doesn't make sense. So on the other end of it, what do you say to like the employees that's looking for a job, not to go in cocky, but go in a way to where you really want to share and say what you need to say without um, being cocky about it? So, because if we take the leaders to try to get them in a certain way, we need you to come a certain way as well.
Yeah, so I actually have interview questions that I recommend candidates ask their future employer about their culture. And again, where you're asking for stories and examples, right? When you say, well, tell me about your values. Oh, well, can you tell me a story of how that's been exemplified, in the organization? I also encourage candidates to ask to speak to some current team members and be like, hey, do you mind? I would love to just connect with a few of your team members and hear what their experience has been like here. Now, granted, they're going to give you the people that really enjoy working there, but
first they're gonna be like, wait, what? What do you mean?
But if they're only giving you people that have been there 3 months and they're not giving you someone who's been there 3 years, right? That's a red flag.
Yeah.
So there's just there's a way, just as they're vetting you to find out if you're a good fit, like you can also vet them and just say, I'd love to talk to, like, do you have a couple team members that I can connect with and just find out a little bit of what it's been like working here, and maybe someone who's been here 3 months and someone who's been here 3 years. I mean, you can even specifically ask, and they shouldn't hesitate. If they don't have any qualms, they should be like, oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, and I would assert that actually makes you sound more compelling as a candidate.
I like that. I've never heard nobody say that before, but I like that.
Yeah. So there's and I apologize, I don't have off the top of my head like the questions to ask, but I know we've got it in one of our culture tips. Okay. But I don't have it. Yeah. And if you want, I can search for it and get you the link. I don't know if you do show notes, but then that way, or anyways, but yeah, that's something that we have, like questions that you can ask your potential employer.
Okay. Wow. This has been a really great conversation. I could probably talk to you for another 2 hours.
I know. But I mean, we got part 3, part 4.
Yes. Seriously now, don't challenge me. But I mean, because it's a lot of conversations like this that need to be had. And of course, each one of these would be, could be so different depending on the organization and whatever the thing is within your organization. The time frame could be different, the situation, solution, all of these different things will be based on what that is. And I'm encouraging every leader, manager, C-suite executive, employee, whatever you're calling yourself today, that you're watching this video, and it's a great opportunity for you to understand why your organization should choose people. And if you don't know, you need to contact Choose People so you can understand that. everybody know how they can reach you, connect with you, bring you in, all of those good things.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. Very simply, our website is choosepeople.com. We have a contact form on there that you can certainly reach us, but I will invite your audience. You are welcome to reach out to me directly. It's Kris with a K, so just KRIS at choosepeople.com. And that's really the best route. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn and all those places, but really direct email, that's where I spend a lot of time there. So yeah.
Wow.
Great.
This was interesting. And then you mentioned the questions for interviews, and it's on Culture Tips. Is that on your website as well?
Yes, it is. The interview questions that if you're an employee looking for a new opportunity, it is on my website. It's in our Culture Tips.
Okay.
And you'll just have to search a little bit. And again, yeah.
Okay.
I can't throw it over the fence to you, Melissa. I don't know if you have a place to put that for people. I can also send you the return on investment of happy employees document that if the person listening to this podcast is the second in command or the HR person, then they're like, yeah, but how do I get buy-in? It's a great document to help to get buy-in.
Out. Excellent. You're getting a lot of information here, people. So take advantage of it. Don't miss out on this, because we don't want you to force any fun. We want you to understand what your blind spot is and look over in that blind spot so you can fix that thing. Generate an agreement and have a cadence of accountability. So those are all of the gems that I wrote down. There was so much more, but that's all I could catch as I was writing. But out of all of those, I hope you catch one of those and contact Kriss. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks.
Follow us on our Instagram at SavvyMagBiz and on our YouTube channel, Savvy, the Business Podcast. Thank you for joining us on Savvy, the Business Podcast. If you want to be a guest, send an email to media@savvymag.biz. That's media@savvymag.biz. Don't miss out on the opportunity to be heard by millions.